Hey everyone, before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more exciting content. The desert night was so dark you could feel it pressing against your eyeballs. Below the cockpit of the lone Z-53 Super Stallion, the Helmand River glimmered like a black snake, and beyond it, the lights of a Marine regiment were going out one by one. 540 men of the 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines were surrounded, out of water, out of ammunition, and out of time. The radio had gone quiet except for the occasional burst of a dying man's voice begging for help that command had already written off. Officially, the mission to extract them was impossible. Weather too low, enemy AAA too thick, no moon, no tanker support, no escort. The order from Camp Leatherneck was clear. Stand down. Let them go. Acceptable loss. But one pilot never got that order. Captain Madison Maddie Riley, callsign Reaper, had already landed back at Bastion when the final mayday came through. She was supposed to be in the rack, boots off, flight suit half unzipped, pretending the war hadn't followed her into her dreams again. Instead, she stood in the ready room in socks, staring at the satellite feed of 540 green dots blinking red one after another. Her co-pilot, a brand new warrant officer named Park, whispered, "They're gone, ma'am. We can't even see the LZ." Maddie didn't answer. She just pulled her flight suit the rest of the way on, grabbed her helmet, and said the sentence that would become legend in the Corps. "Then we'll fly by feel." Maddie sprinted across the flight line with Park and her 2 crew chiefs running to keep up. Her bird, tail number 164783, call sign Reaper 6-1, had already been towed into the hangar for a cracked tail rotor gearbox. Maintenance had red XD it, unflyable. Maddie told the sergeant major in charge of the line, "Uncouple it, now." He laughed until she looked him dead in the eye and said, 540 Marines, top. You want to explain to their mothers why my hello stayed in the barn." The laugh died. 10 minutes later, the Super Stallion was dragged back onto the ramp by hand, chains clanking like a death knell in reverse. She took off alone. No wingman, no escort, no approval. Just one heavy helicopter, for souls aboard, and a promise she made to a grainy infrared screen full of men who still had heartbeats. The weather was a 300-foot ceiling and rained so hard the wipers couldn't keep up. AAA started reaching for her the moment she crossed the Registan. Tracers floated up like orange fireflies, lazy until they weren't. Park kept whispering, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus," every time the cockpit lit up. Maddie never flinched. She flew so low the crew chiefs in the back said they could read the graffiti on mud walls. 43 minutes out, the radio crackled with a voice Maddie knew too well. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Gravedigger Graves, the battalion commander of 27, a man famous for never asking for help. His transmission was broken, weak, but unmistakable. "Any station, this net. If anyone can hear me. Tell my wife the kids were everything. We're done here." Then nothing but open mic breathing and distant screams. Maddie keyed the mic once. "Gravedigger, this is Reaper 6-1. Save the goodbye letter, sir. I'm inbound with cold water and a bad attitude. Keep your boys alive 15 more minutes." Dead silence on the net. Then, almost like he couldn't believe it, Graves came back. "Reaper, you are not cleared for this LZ. Repeat, negative clearance. Abort." Maddie smiled in the dark. "Sorry, Colonel. You're breaking up. See you in 15. The twist nobody saw coming was already in motion. 3 days earlier, Intel had missed a battalion-sized Taliban force moving T-55 tanks into the valley on flatbeds under the cover of a sandstorm. By the time February 7th realized they weren't facing a couple hundred fighters but a mechanized assault, it was too late to break contact. The Marines formed a night perimeter everyone privately called the Alamo. Ammunition ran dry. The quick reaction force from Dwyer got shredded by Zu-23s. Air support dried up when a British Apache took a direct hit and the fixed-wing guys refused to fly into the metal storm. Command made the coldest decision in the war. Write off the battalion, preserve the aircraft, fight another day. Acceptable loss. But Maddie Riley had a secret nobody in the ready room knew. Her younger brother, Lance Corporal Ryan Riley, was a rifleman in Fox Company February 7th. She hadn't even known he was in country until she saw the roster 2 weeks earlier. She told no one. If she had, she'd have been grounded for conflict of interest. So she carried it alone the way she carried everything. Now the secret was screaming in her headset because the last voice she'd heard begging for water belonged to Ryan. She pushed the cyclic forward until the airframe groaned. The engine torque needles pegged. A 164783 had never been flown this hard, gearbox cracked or not. Over the intercom she told her crew, "If this thing comes apart, aim it at the enemy. Nobody rides for free tonight." The crew chiefs racked the M240S and answered in unison, "Yes, ma'am." 10 miles from the LZ, the Taliban unveiled their surprise. 2 Russian SA-8 Gecko surface-to-air missile systems nobody knew they had. The first missile missed high. The second locked on. Maddie yanked the helo into a violent pedal turn. Dumping flares, the missile detonating close enough to pepper the fuselage with shrapnel. Park screamed that they were on fire. Maddie looked back, saw fuel streaming from the auxiliary tank, and said, "Good, means we're still moving." She rolled the burning helo inverted long enough to blow the fire out, then leveled at 10 feet off the deck. The move was impossible in a Super Stallion, but impossible was having a bad night. On the ground, Colonel Graves had ordered every remaining flare and flashlight pointed skyward to mark the tiny landing zone inside their shrinking perimeter. The sight from the cockpit looked like a dying constellation. Marines were stacked shoulder to shoulder in fighting holes, some already motionless. In the center, a 19-year-old lance corporal with Riley blood in his veins was tying his last tourniquet around his own thigh, praying his big sister never found out he failed. Then the sky split open with rotor wash. Reaper 6-1 came in so low and fast the downblast flattened men to the ground. Maddie hovered one wheel on a crumbling mud wall and the other on a burned-out Humvee, the only flat spot left. The crew chiefs threw out the ramp while the door gunners opened fire with belt-fed fury. Taliban fighters who had been seconds from overrunning the position were cut down in the strobing muzzle flashes. Marines who could still walk ran, crawled, or were dragged up the ramp. Colonel Graves stood at the bottom, personally throwing his wounded aboard, refusing to climb until the last man was loaded. Maddie counted. 50, 80, 120. The helo was never designed to lift this many combat-loaded men. The torque gauges redlined. The gearbox screamed like a living thing. They were still short almost 300 when the SA-8 radar locked again. This time there was no room to maneuver. Maddie made the call nobody wanted. Cut the wounded loose if you have to, but nobody left behind. The crew chiefs ignored her. They locked arms and hauled until their gloves smoked. With 538 souls crammed inside a helicopter meant for 50, Maddie pulled pitch. The Super Stallion clawed for altitude on fire again, gearbox seizing, hydraulic fluid painting the windscreen. A T-55 round detonated underneath them and blew out the tail rotor. The helo spun violently. Park froze. Maddie took the controls from him, slammed the stick forward, and rode the torque like a bronc rider. Somehow, someway, she muscled the dying bird northwest toward friendly lines. 20 miles to go when the gearbox finally let go with a sound like God-ripping sheet metal. The helicopter fell out of the sky. Maddie auto-rotated into the desert floor at 90 knots, belly flopping into soft sand hard enough to shear the landing gear. Every soul aboard was injured. Many were critical, but every heart was still beating. The final twist came at dawn. As the sun rose blood-red over the dunes, a column of Marine LAVs that had been written off as destroyed came roaring across the sand. The quick reaction force from Dwyer hadn't been wiped out after all. They'd played dead, waited for the Taliban to overextend, then counterattacked at first light. When they reached the smoking hulk of Reaper 6-1, they found Captain Madison Riley sitting on the ramp, uniform burned, face black with soot and blood, passing the last canteen of water to a private who'd lost both legs. Beside her, Colonel Graves stood at attention, saluting a captain 4 ranks his junior because, as he later wrote in the citation, some people outrank their pay grade by the size of their soul. All 540 Marines lived. Some would never walk again. Some would never speak of that night without shaking. But they lived because one pilot decided orders, physics, and common sense to go straight to hell. Maddie Riley was grounded for 60 days, faced a general court-martial, and received the Medal of Honor in the same week. The president pinned it on her chest while she was still on crutches. When he asked what she wanted more than anything, she said, "My hello back, sir." They gave her a new one. She named it Acceptable Loss and flew it until the day she retired a lieutenant colonel. The Marine Corps still teaches the mission at Quantico. They call it, "The Night We Learned Impossible is Just an Opinion." And every year on November 27th, 540 men, now grandfathers, cops, mechanics, senators, and at least one schoolteacher, raise a glass to the sister who refused to let them die. That's the story of how one woman with cracked gearbox and a brother's name on her dog tags rewrote the laws of war. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me what part of this great country you're watching from right now. California, Texas, New York, Kansas, wherever the flag flies and the heart beats red, white, and blue. Let's put 540 pins in the map and show the world what American family looks like. Semper Fi.